Coming up, Joy Reid firing from MSNBC brings a race furor from Democrats. Continued complaints about DOGE and a reality check from Representative Byron Donald. And Pete Hegseth has a brilliant rejoinder to a stupid question. Joy Reid breaks down over her firing.
My show had value, and that that what I was doing had value. And in the end, I try not to cry on TV. And I say this is kind of like me on TV, so I apologize. And that it mattered. I see Karen is there, and she's been texting me as well. And so what I will just say is that in the end, thank you. Where I land is that the moment of guilt that I felt, that I went hard on so many issues, whether it was the Black Lives Matter issues.
Serial racist and race baiter Joy Reid has put up a tearful video relating to her being unceremoniously fired from MSNBC. She believes her program had value. It didn't, unless you were a racist determined to be a fellow traveller regarding racist issues. Unfortunately, as you will see, there is altogether too much of that in the US with the left and with Democrats. Of course, one of the racist groups that Reid supported was the corrupt and racist Black Lives Matter. It is good to see that one less racist has the bully pulpit of a syndicated network TV show. On her final show, she was determined to show what she thought of herself.
From enslaved people fighting their captivity. Shout out to Harriet Tubman, who was a 92%er before 92%ing was cool. And even taking up arms during the Civil War. To the women's movement and the workers' rights movement and the Stonewall gay rights movement. They've all been versions of the fight to make this a free country for everyone and to have a true multiracial democracy. And that is history's most important lesson, right? That the most important thing, the first rule, is to fight back, to never stop resisting. Do not obey in advance, as Tim Snyder put it.
Look at the company that Reid seeks to put herself in. She talks of a true multiracial democracy, but the reality is she has never sought that. She has sought race baiting in a society in which systemic suppression of the races other than the white majority has long since gone. She seeks to put herself in the company of genuine heroes who literally put themselves in harm's way. All Reid has put herself in front of is a few $1 million per annum to keep pushing her racist bile and victim mentality, when she is one of the extraordinarily privileged in the society that she trashes. If you enjoy this content, please like, share and subscribe. Then we have ex-NBC employee Tiffany Cross.
And I want you all to know why this is so precious and why it matters. In the news media, it is so rare for Black women, Black people, period, but Black women to have a voice and a platform. Across all newsrooms, only 6% of newsroom staff is Black. When you disaggregate that data, that means the number of Black women are even fewer. When you disaggregate that data, that means the number of conscious Black women who are not only Black faces, but Black voices are even fewer.
Talk about racism. In this 31-second snippet, the word black was enunciated no less than 8 times. Her whole rant is just about race. Nothing about talent or ability. Nothing to do with appeal to an audience. After all, Reid's ratings had crashed. This focus on race is why there is still such an issue with race in the US. It is due to the left constantly beating it up, rather than working for a harmonious society that has no policy differentiating on the basis of race. Then we have Don Lemon.
Remember when Joy Reid laughingly mocked white women tears as pathetic and offensive to her? Who's crying now, Joy? Good riddance to the absolute worst person on television, and shame on NBC for letting it go on this long. And she has a, she is an axe to grind when it comes to MSNBC. And also, this whole, she's racist, right? It's just, I'm going to give you the evidence. Supposedly learned from it and then spent every day after apologizing for it and being fired for it, then spent every day proving the point that she is a racist. And not very supportive of women. If you look, all you have to do, the evidence is in her Google search and what she says about women, how she calls them out all the time.
And here we have Don Lemon, who pulls out not only the race card, but also the sexism card. This is cereal with Lemon. So for him, a person who does not want to discriminate on the basis of race is a racist. In fact, clearly, according to Lemon, people who don't positively discriminate when it comes to blacks is a racist. Then on the sexism thing, how dare Megyn Kelly call out a woman? She is such a sexist for doing that. She would not be sexist, obviously, if only she called men out. This is the perverted, inverted logic of those on the left. And then we have Rachel Maddow.
Network, she is leaving the network altogether. And that is very, very, very hard to take. I am 51 years old. I have been gainfully employed since I was 12. And I have had so many different kinds of jobs, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But in all of the jobs I have had, in all of the years I have been alive, there is no colleague for whom I have had more affection and more respect than Joy Reid. I love everything about her. I have learned so much from her. I have so much more to learn from her. I do not want to lose her as a colleague here at MSNBC. And personally, I think it is a bad mistake to let her walk out the door. It is not my call, and I understand that, but that's what I think. I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two, count them, two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend.
Maddow clearly likes Joy Reid, going in to bat for her, and in that sense, good on Maddow for fighting for a friend. But of course, being Maddow on MSNBC, it could not go on without once again pulling out the race card. As with Tiffany Cross, she has to focus on racial groups. Like all leftists, they claim to be opposed to racism, yet all they can think of is race, race, race. How about looking at people as individuals and not people that are absolutely defined by immutable characteristics such as race? Talking about racism, how about this clown, Pastor Jamal Bryant, preaching in front of, among others, Louis Farrakhan?
I feel bad for them in the White House who are in there tap dancing for massa, wearing bow ties, shinning and grinding, laughing like nothing is funny. But I ain't afraid of the spooks that sat at the door. These runaway slaves hiding in the White House gonna throw my picture up thinking that I'm gonna be afraid.
This guy is coming out with all of the Uncle Tom's Cabin memes. This is awful, and I won't repeat some of the words he uses here. Ironically, he is the one with the slave thinking, viewing all blacks as being the same. He is the one who is diminishing blacks, as seeing them as essentially mindless and having to follow their masses. In this case, people like him and Louis Farrakhan. How dare blacks think for themselves? These people on the left are desperately trying to ignite a race war. Victor Davis Hanson on the issue regarding MSNBC and CNN.
They were unhinged before George Floyd, but somewhere between Me Too, 2018-19, and George Floyd after that, they really did miscalculate. They thought that the country, because of their hatred of Donald Trump, and then especially the George Floyd riots, and then the election of Joe Biden, they thought that this was a new frontier and that Joe Biden, we were into a revolutionary period, and Biden was this useful waxen effigy for all of these Obama people, and they were going to have this radical agenda, and these people at MSNBC and to a lesser extent CNN were going to ride this wave and propel it, and they could say anything they want. The blinders were off, the muzzles were off. They could say, do anything, and they really did. And they didn't realize the mood of the country, where it was. We were in the middle of a counter-revolution because people were sick of an open border and the whole transgendered stuff and the crime.
Hansen makes the point that the left, and particularly the left media, thought that there had been a ground shift in their direction following the Me Too, BLM, and the election of Biden. He views the reality as being the opposite, that there was actually a counter to those movements gaining prominence. I agree with him, except for one point. I think the left-wing media have been on this since the biggest race-baiting president in the last century or more, that being Barack Obama in 2008. Where there was a huge opportunity under him to further the cause of racial harmony, he drove more and more wedges in there. Disappointingly, it has become more and more evident that the Obamas, despite all that the USA has gifted them, and that is a lot, that they hate the USA and have seething resentment for some reason. Then we have Caroline Levitt about the court decision on Associated Press.
And the winning continues here at the White House every day. Today, a federal judge right here in Washington, D.C., denied the Associated Press's emergency request for a temporary restraining order to restore their privilege of returning to the White House press pool. And the judge's denial of the Associated Press's request reinforces what I said from the podium last week and what President Trump has been saying. Covering the American presidency in the most intimate and limited spaces in this White House, in the Oval Office, on the Air Force One, is a privilege. It is not a legal right. And we want all voices to have that opportunity. And that's why we've expanded the James S. Brady briefing room to invite truly legitimate, independent journalists, podcasters, and other media types into that room to cover this president with honesty and accuracy and with real mindfulness of what the American people actually care about.
As Levitt says about AP being excluded from the White House briefing room in Air Force One, there is no constitutional guarantee regarding this sort of access. This is a privileged position that there are many media organisations would love to have. However, AP have a sense of entitlement to that access. They believe that it is theirs, almost as if it is the divine right of kings. The reality is the Trump administration is in no way trying to restrict AP's ability to report. There is no censorship or anything else. Then we have Kayleigh McInerney.
Maria, I think, there's a risk of oversimplifying all of this because I do think federal employees fall into three buckets. You have the political appointees, some of whom are thrilled that this is happening. They see this as a revolution in government. Then you have this other pot of hardworking federal government employees. I don't think they care who the president is. I think they care deeply about their job, and that pot does exist. But that is not all federal workers. There are federal workers that have this attitude. This was an NBC anonymous communication that came to them. Saw this a few weeks ago. This is a federal employee at the Department of Veteran Affairs. A lot of us are going to stay out of spite, they said. We're here for however long we want to be here. I could be here until retirement. In 30 years, the Trump administration is only here for 4. What's wrong with trying to root out an employee staying out of spite? The background is this. This is not a Republican newspaper, a conservative newspaper. This is the Washington Post 4 years ago. Resistance from within the federal government. Listen to this. Less than 2 weeks into the Trump administration, federal workers are in regular consultation with recently departed Obama-era political appointees about what they can do to push back against the new president's initiatives. There was even a support group that took place about how to resist the Trump administration. That should not happen.
This attitude of resisting the administration is disgraceful. The job of federal employees is to carry out the will of the administration, which is actually carrying out the will of the people. Whether they like it or not, and in many cases in the bureaucracy is so far left that they clearly won't like it, they have a duty to do their duty. This politicisation of the bureaucracy is appalling. It is expected and reasonable for political appointees where the understanding is that they are employed for the life of the administration. But for those who are permanent federal employees, they are privileged in terms of having ongoing employment. The other side of that contract is that they faithfully undertake the work of their employers, the people of the USA under the elected president. Then we have discussion on CNN on this issue.
It's abusive.
Random.
It's abusive.
Yes,
to get an email?
I do. I do think that. I think the way that they are. Yeah, I think the way that they are treating them.
Why? How is this abusive?
Scott, have you ever gotten an email from someone that said you better do this or else you're going to resign?
Yeah, it's called having the boss of the private sector.
From someone who's not your boss?
Well, the White House is every federal worker's boss. That's number one.
Elon Musk is not anybody's boss.
Scott, how is Elon going to evaluate? I mean, how is he going to evaluate the work of thousands of federal employees when he has no idea what they do?
He's not. The test was, are you even paying attention to your email? Are you even at your terminal?
Some federal workers, he sent it on a weekend. Some federal workers do not have access to their emails on the weekends. They just don't.
Did they go to work today? I mean, look, the amount of outrage, melting down, and sort of outpouring of emotion over this.
As you would expect from most of the participants on the CNN program, they're outraged that there should be a requirement for employees to state what they have done in the previous week. Are they concerned that the workers who have done nothing will be found out? It is not that onerous to send a quick email. As Scott Jennings said, in part this is a test to see whether these people even keep abreast of their work emails. Then we have Jessica Tarlov on the public's perception of DOGE.
And you see Republicans all over the country. And no, Jesse, these are not plants that are showing up at their town halls.
I never said that.
But you were thinking that.
Okay, so I headed you off. They were actually people who worked at the CDC in Rich McCormick's district. But people are showing up in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Wisconsin, and they're saying what's going on at DOGE is unacceptable. And are you kidding me with these Medicaid cuts?
This is fascinating to see just how far some of these leftist Democrats are. Tarlov goes on about what is going on at DOGE, and it's unacceptable, when at the same time you see a Harvard questionnaire regarding DOGE, and Harvard is hardly right-wing. And as you can see, a solid majority of Americans are very solidly supportive of what DOGE is doing. Talk about tone deaf. Then we have Representative Byron Donalds on DOGE's access to federal documents.
This is the kind of stuff. They're so upset about Elon Musk and the DOGE team having access to the Internal Revenue Service data into the Treasury payment system. But there's a report that came out the other day that under Joe Biden, he let 53 researchers and students, unpaid people, go in and actually have full access to the data of the American people at the IRS. Joe Biden's administration let that happen. So they have no problem with the waste and the fraud and the abuse as long as their special interest groups are being funded and their ideology is being promoted regardless of the will of the American people.
Donalds points to the gross hypocrisy of those Democrats and fellow travelers complaining about DOGE's access to information. As we have discussed before, the fact is that DOGE is not getting into the personal details of, for instance, the IRS details about individuals. Unbelievably, Biden gave full access to researchers and students to access these very self-same full IRS details. Who voted for these researchers and students to allow them this access? This is using the hypocritical Democrats' own arguments. Now, just to lighten the mood a bit, here is Pete Hegseth, replying to a question about the nominated chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff being unqualified.
Why did you select an underqualified retired lieutenant general to be the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff?
I'm gonna choose to reject your unqualified question. Who's next?
That's a brilliant comeback. I have nothing to add. What do you think about Democrats and the left ramping up the race war? Please let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching.